It's not a market crash. It's not crypto. And it's not some clickbait headline warning of a global collapse. What's happening right now is quieter and far more telling. Across the country, retirees are slowly walking away from one investment they once considered untouchable. Not because of panic, but because they've started to see the cracks. The numbers don't make sense anymore. The promises feel outdated. And what was once seen as the safest way to protect retirement savings is now starting to look like a dead end. They're not talking about it at dinner tables or flashing warnings on financial news. But if you pay attention, really pay attention, you'll see the shift happening. Retirees are choosing something different. Not riskier, not reckless, just smarter, more flexible, more in tune with what retirement actually looks like in 2025. In this video, we're breaking down the quiet exodus from this once reliable investment, why it's happening, what it means, and what retirees are turning to instead. Because if you're still clinging to this outdated strategy, you might be holding onto an anchor when what you really need is a parachute. For decades, bonds were the gold standard of retirement planning. Safe, stable, predictable. They were the go-to move for anyone nearing retirement who wanted income without risk. Your financial advisor probably called them conservative. Your portfolio likely had a chunk labeled fixed income, and for years that strategy worked. Bonds offered steady payouts and rarely made headlines. But then something changed, and retirees started paying the price. Between 2022 and 2024, bond markets did something most retirees never expected. They lost money. Not just a little, but enough to shake the confidence of people who thought bonds were bulletproof. Funds that were supposed to protect wealth suddenly posted double-digit losses. Retirement accounts dipped, income dried up, and for many, the illusion of low risk was shattered. The problem wasn't just the numbers, it was the betrayal of trust. Retirees weren't betting on crypto or chasing stocks. They were following the old rule book, the one that said bonds would keep them safe. But the reality proved different. What used to be dependable started to look like dead weight, and slowly, quietly, more retirees began to ask the question no one wanted to say out loud. Are bonds still worth it? When interest rates started rising, most people cheered. Finally, savers would earn more. But for bondholders, it was a wake-up call. Because rising rates don't just affect new investments, they crush the value of existing ones. The bond you bought 5 years ago, locked in at a 2% yield, suddenly, it's worth far less when new bonds are offering 4% or more. And just like that, the so-called safe side of your portfolio starts bleeding value. This is what blindsided so many retirees. They weren't taking risks. They were doing what every expert told them to do, load up on bonds as you get older. But when the Federal Reserve hiked rates aggressively to fight inflation, those bonds tanked. Prices dropped. Monthly statements turned red. And the people who were relying on bonds for steady income found themselves stuck between two bad choices: sell at a loss or hold and watch inflation eat away at their real returns. The worst part? There was no easy fix. Bonds weren't offering the protection they promised, and getting out meant taking a hit. It didn't feel like investing anymore. It felt like being trapped. And that's when retirees started looking for the exits. Because if your so-called safe investment can drop 10 to 15% in a single year, is it really safe at all? Even if bond prices had stayed flat, there was another silent killer lurking in the background: inflation. It crept in fast, and it hit harder than anyone expected. Suddenly, the cost of groceries, gas, and healthcare surged, and that guaranteed bond income, it couldn't keep up. Retirees who had once been comfortable on fixed returns began to feel the squeeze. The numbers on paper hadn't changed, but what those numbers could buy had. Here's the brutal truth. A 3% yield means nothing when inflation is running at 6% or more. That's not income, it's erosion. Every month, retirees were effectively losing purchasing power, even as they collected interest. Their real income was shrinking. And the worst part? There was no adjustment. Bonds don't rise with inflation. They don't flex. They just sit there, slowly bleeding value while everything around them gets more expensive. This was the moment many retirees realized they weren't protected at all. They were exposed, locked into investments that couldn't defend against the very thing eating their savings alive. And for some, that was the final straw, because losing money is one thing, but watching your safe investments lose ground, even when they're doing what they're supposed to, that feels like betrayal. Retirement used to be about locking things in, setting up a fixed income stream, and letting it carry you through the years. But that mindset is changing fast. After living through volatile markets, sudden inflation, and unpredictable interest rates, more retirees are realizing that flexibility isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And that's where bonds fall flat. When your money is tied up in long-term bonds, you lose the ability to pivot. Need to adjust your withdrawals? Too bad. Want to shift your strategy? You're stuck unless you sell at a loss. Bonds demand patience, but the world retirees live in now doesn't wait. Healthcare costs spike, the market shifts, inflation rises, and retirees want the ability to respond, not sit helpless while their locked-in investments underperform. That's why there's a growing shift toward more liquid, more adaptable income sources. High-yield savings, short-term CDs, dividend-paying stocks, even flexible annuities, these options let retirees adjust in real time. They offer control, they offer access, and they reflect a new retirement reality where security isn't just about playing it safe, it's about being ready for whatever comes next. Bonds, once the backbone of every retirement portfolio, suddenly feel like dead weight in a world that rewards movement. What's replacing bonds isn't one magic fix. It's a smarter blend of tools that work together to generate income, offer flexibility, and hedge against risk. Retirees in 2025 aren't just swapping one asset for another. They're building what some advisors now call hybrid income strategies. And these aren't fringe ideas. They're becoming the new standard for people who want more than just survival from their retirement savings. Think dividend-paying ETFs that provide consistent cash flow, covered call funds that generate income while limiting downside, real estate investment trusts or REITs that offer inflation-resistant yields without owning physical property, even laddered CDs or structured notes that balance protection with potential growth. These aren't risky bets. They're diversified plays that offer retirees what bonds used to: income, stability, and peace of mind, but with more control and often better returns. And then there are annuities with built-in income guarantees that don't lock you in forever, newer products that adjust for inflation, offer flexible withdrawals, and even include long-term care benefits. The game has changed. Retirees aren't ditching bonds because they want more risk. They're ditching them because they want options. And for the first time in a long time, they're finding investments that actually deliver. But the shift away from bonds isn't just about returns or flexibility, it runs deeper. For many retirees, it's emotional, psychological. It's about trust and the feeling that something they were told would always be safe simply isn't anymore. After watching conservative bond funds lose value, fail to protect against inflation, and lock up cash when they needed it most, something inside retirees changed. The faith was broken. This wasn't a panic. It was quiet, personal. Retirees started asking harder questions. Why am I still in this fund? What value is it actually giving me? Why am I paying fees on something that's dragging down my portfolio? And perhaps the biggest question of all, who is this investment really protecting? Because for too long, bonds were treated like a default setting, a box to check. But now that autopilot mindset is being replaced with something else: ownership. Retirees are no longer content to follow the traditional playbook. They're digging deeper, building smarter portfolios, and refusing to stay stuck in outdated models just because it's what everyone else does. Bonds didn't just lose performance, they lost the confidence of the very people they were supposed to serve. And once that trust is gone, it rarely comes back. This isn't about fear, it's about clarity. For years, bonds were the cornerstone of every retirement plan: stable, predictable, safe. But in 2025, more and more retirees are waking up to a different truth. The world changed. Interest rates swung, inflation surged, and the investments that once promised protection started silently failing the people who trusted them most. Not because bonds are inherently bad, but because they no longer fit the retirement that people are actually living. Today's retirees want more than just survival. They want income that grows with them, investments that adapt, and strategies built for reality, not theory. Walking away from bonds doesn't mean abandoning caution. It means choosing control. It means being flexible, being informed, and refusing to let tradition drain your future one safe-sounding percentage point at a time. If you've ever looked at your portfolio and wondered if it still makes sense, now's the time to ask those questions out loud. Because the smartest retirees aren't just riding out 2025, they're reshaping it. And the investment they're quietly leaving behind might be the one you're still holding on to.